My worst Christmas ever was in 2009. And I was living in Moscow for a while in 2009. This sounds really great, but I had like no standards at all when it came to what I was willing to eat on the street. And so I spent like every day, all day, just eating whatever was offered to me. And sometimes there was like stuff growing in it, and sometimes it smelled weird, and I was like, oh, whatever, I'm hungry. So I ate it. And by the time I got back to Utah, I felt really sick all the time. And I felt like something was growing and living inside of me. I had like this stomach ache all the time. And also I was losing a lot of weight. And I couldn't really afford to lose a lot of weight, so it like wasn't a happy occasion. And so I felt like this rumbling, and I was pretty sure I had a tapeworm. And I'd never had a tapeworm, so it was kind of exciting. And I named him Lohan, and I started referring to him as the brother I never had, and I was kind of happy that he was around, but he kept getting worse and worse, and it was like growing inside of me and causing me discomfort, and I'm pretty sure this is exactly how it feels to be pregnant in every way possible. And now, like, whenever any of my friends get pregnant and they complain about how hard it is, I'm like, big deal. I was pregnant for a while and it was not that hard. And I'm especially, particularly unsympathetic to those who complain that they can't lose the baby weight, because when I was pregnant with Lohan, I shed pounds. Well, my mom, Kathy, kept telling me that I need to go see the doctor. She's like, you look really sick, you look awful all the time, you need to go see the doctor, go see somebody. And I was really freaked out to go see the doctor, because several years before I had had an appendectomy in Ukraine, and ever since then I thought, if I walk into any doctor's office, they're going to rip me open and start tearing organs out of my body. And I was worried that next time they might tear an organ out of my body that really mattered, like my heart. I'd never be able to feel compassion again. And so I was avoiding this and avoiding it, and I kept losing weight, and I was getting skinnier and skinnier, and it started getting really concerning when people I didn't even know were commenting on how I looked. And I remember one time I was standing in line for a burrito in Salt Lake, and this woman in the line behind me asked me if I was undergoing some sort of treatment. Because she could see like my ribs through my shirt, and I was holding my pants up with a rope or something. And I was like, no. And she's like, well, you're really skinny. And I was like, well, I'm trying to lose 30 more pounds by Christmas so I can fit into some pants that I bought in the child section of Walmart on accident. Can't return them because I accidentally spilled crystal meth on them. So finally I was like, you know what, I'm going to go see the doctor because pretty soon I'm going to die. And so went to the doctor's office, and I was sitting in the waiting room. She finally called me up and she started asking me all these questions about myself. And I felt like I was way overusing the word diarrhea in my answers. But that was like the main point of my being there, so I needed to be really clear about that. And finally she's like, okay, well, she handed me this cup, and she's like, I go into the bathroom right there, I need a sample. And I was like, buy a guy a drink first. And then I like took the cup and went into the bathroom, and I was trying really hard not to overreact because I didn't want to cause a scene, but I was really nervous. And actually not wanting to cause a scene is probably the best motivation of my life for not overreacting to things, because sometimes I'm like feeling a lot of road rage on the freeway, and I'm seconds away from turning my car sideways and causing a 50-car pileup. But then I'm like, no, then you'll be on the news and people will know you're not wearing pants. So I'm in this bathroom, and I started peeing into the cup, and I was like, oh my gosh, how am I this dehydrated? And the thing was, like, I knew I was going to go see a doctor that day, so I don't know why it didn't occur to me that I should like flush out my system, because I was really dehydrated, and it was like really cloudy, and I was like, I'm going to take this back out and everybody's going to know how dehydrated I am. How embarrassing is that? And I thought about diluting it with water, but I didn't really understand like how the medical world works, and I thought if this like renders my sample useless, it won't be worth it, because then I'll have to come back and do this whole song and dance again. So I just like swallowed my pride and took it out there, and I handed it to the lady. And there are a few more awkward things in life than handing a cup of your own urine to a complete stranger. And anytime you think our society has evolved and we've become a lot more civilized, keep in mind we're still peeing into cups and handing it to strangers so that they can determine whether there are worms living inside of us. So I hand this to her, and she's like, oh my gosh, this is so much worse than you described. And I was like, I'm just really dehydrated, it was hard to pee. And she's like, oh, no, you weren't supposed to pee into this cup. And she put emphasis on the word pee, like I was supposed to do something else into the cup. And I suddenly got really freaked out that maybe that something else was like spit, and how gross that I just urinated into something I was only supposed to spit into. And I was like halfway out the door and had already picked out my new witness protection program name and location. Willow. I would like to be called Willow. Now I can't use that. And she was like, no, this is for a stool sample. And she's like, you're supposed to poop into the cup. This story's really gross. Every time I come here, like sometime in the middle of the story, I think, they won't invite me back. But so she said this to me, and I immediately blurted out loud enough for everybody in the whole hospital to hear, how do you expect somebody to poop into a cup on demand? What is this, the circus? And by the way, if ever there is a circus act where this is a thing, and I'm at that circus, I am immediately going to go see the bearded woman until that part is over. And I don't even like women with facial hair. So I took the cup back into the bathroom, and I was like standing there for a while, and I called my sister, Chrysanda. I have a sister named Chrysanda. She like works at this health clinic, and I called her, and I was like, I'm in the bathroom of the hospital, and they want me to poop into a cup. And she's like, okay, why are you calling me? I was like, is this a thing? Is this a real thing? Do you really have to do they really make you do this? And she's like, just do what the doctor tells you to do. Just do it. You can do it. She's like encouraging me. And I was like, it's really weird that my sister's encouraging me to poop into a cup right now on the phone. But she was helpful. And anyway, so this went on for like an hour and 34 minutes. And then I finally walked back out with an empty cup. And I was like, I can't do it. Like she had asked me to like sacrifice my firstborn. Like it was Abraham from the Bible. And she's like, well, you can come back another time and try it again. I was like, I don't want to anticipate another one of these doctor visits. And she's like, well, these are your choices. And so I went back in the bathroom and was like, okay, I can do this. And I made it happen. And I brought the cup back out, and I did not even pay somebody on the street to poop for me. And that is a sentence I never thought I would say when telling a story about my life. I handed it to her, and she like did some analysis or whatever, and she's like, yep, you have tapeworm. And I was like, okay, great. Lohan exists. I've been telling people that for months. And she's like, here, take these pills. It'll kill him in short order. And I was like, how dare you? Lohan is practically a member of my family. And she held up the picture, and she's like, this is what Lohan looks like. And I was like, can I start taking these pills today? So I started taking the pills, but it was like, damage was done. I was really, really thin. I was really sickly, and Christmas was approaching. And I was in the middle of law school at the time. Law school finals were coming. It was approaching December. And this was the year that the infamous swine flu was sweeping across the world. And for reasons that don't really make sense to me now, I thought I was immune to swine flu. And so I like threw caution to the wind, and like whenever anybody was sick, I was like, let's make out. And I like didn't care. I really thought I was going to be fine. And sure enough, all of a sudden, one day, I was like really, really sick. And did anybody get swine flu that year? Yeah. And yeah, right? Amazing that we're still here to tell the tale. Because it was the most awful thing. It was horrible, horrible thing. And I was just like, I had no strength. And I was at the law school one day, and because I kept trying to go to school because I was like, no, I'm not sick. I can't get swine flu. I'm immune. And I was laying on the floor at the law school in this hallway, and my good friend Annette approached me, and she's like, get up, get in my car, and take you to the hospital. I'm taking you to the doctor. And I was like, no, not again. What if they make me poop into a cup? So she took me to the BYU health clinic, and we walked in, and the doctor was like, yeah, you definitely have swine flu, prescribed me a whole bunch of drugs, which ended up making it a pretty fun Christmas, and then sent me on my way. And so that night I like went home, and I was like, okay, maybe I really am sick. I started taking these drugs, went to bed. I woke up at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and my heart was like beating really fast, and I felt really sick, and this is the swine flu, and it was in full force. And of course, what do you do when you're lightheaded? You stand up and start walking around. So I stood up, and it was like, I'm going to go get some water from the bathroom. And I walked out into the hallway of this apartment I was living in, and I felt myself lose consciousness, and I passed out on the floor. And I came to, like, I don't know how much longer after I passed out, like months probably. I came to, and I was laying on my stomach, and my hand was under my body, and my hand was really, really hurting, and I was very dizzy, lightheaded. So I started like crying for help, and it was probably like way overly dramatic because I only know like 2 modes, like complete silence and way overly dramatic. And they're like, help me, somebody help me. And I was living with these 3 guys who were brothers. They were the 3 brothers at the time. And the oldest brother came out of his room, and he looked me down on the floor, and he's like, what happened? And I was like, I don't know, I'm dying. And he's like, he like dropped down on his knees. He's like, what can I do for you? And just then, brother number 2 opened his bedroom door, and he came out and he said, what happened? And they started talking like, well, I don't know, he's on the floor, I can't tell what happened, he's sick, obviously he's sweating all over the place. And just then, for reasons that we still don't understand, brother 2 fainted. And he wasn't even sick. But he's just like, wah. And then like everybody, meaning the one other person, everybody like rushed over to him and was like, no, what's going on? And I was like, seriously, can all the attention just be on me once in my life? And so he's like over there, and they're like dealing with that. And then the 3rd brother came out of his bedroom, and he's like, what happened? And brother number 1 was like, don't pass out, please. And I was like, this is probably what it feels like to go to a school where people drink. So then I was like, hey, I'm really sick and my hand is hurting. Can somebody come and help me? So they came over and they like pulled my arm out from under me and looked at my hand, and this bone in my hand was like poking up like it was a teepee. My hand was now a teepee, which was pretty cool. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm pretty sure it wasn't like that before. And I found out that if I pushed down on it, I could like pop it back into place, but then as soon as I let go, it was like, like swing back up. And like I was pretty sure that this was like a superhero thing, like in X-Men when like something, I've never seen X-Men, I don't know anything about it, but I think like something bad happens to you and then it becomes your like superhero power. And I was like, I hope this is one of those things, but I couldn't think of a use for it, but I'm sure there is one. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. So I called Annette again, who had taken me to the hospital, and I was like, I think something's wrong. I think the swine flu broke my hand. And she's like, I looked at the symptoms online and it doesn't do that. It's different. Okay, so she came over in the morning, like a couple of hours later, and she's like, oh, come look at it. So she like walks in and she's like, let me see your hand. I held it up and she's like, oh my gosh. I was like, but look, if you push it back down. And so she's like, let's go to the doctor. So we went back to the same doctor's office, and we walked in, and the woman at the front like rolled her eyes as we walked in, and I was like, it's for a different reason this time, stupid. I'm not a hypochondriac. Because if she knew how infrequently I had gone to the doctor in the last 5 years, she would have been slow clapping me into that doctor's office and not rolling her eyes. So we get into the doctor, and the doctor like takes all these x-rays and he's like examining it, and we were there for like an hour, and then he says, your hand is broken. And I was like, seriously, how much am I paying you people? And that told me that same thing this morning, and she charges way less than you, and I immediately decided I was going to start going to all of my friends for all of my intrusive physical examinations for the rest of my life, because they charge way less, and we can go to lunch after and gossip about reality TV stars. And so he's like, yeah, you have to, you know, it's broken and you need to go see a specialist. So I like paid a doctor to tell me that my hand was broken, I needed to go see a doctor. So I went to the hand specialist. And it's really weird to me that there are doctors that just look at hands all the time. I guess they're complicated. I mean, all I know is it's not supposed to look like a teepee, but there's more to it than that. And so I was sitting in this waiting room for a little while, and there were all these other people in the waiting room who all had like hand problems. Like all of their hands were broken. Like, lots of hands get broken, I guess. And this little like impromptu support group broke out in this waiting room. And like this woman was like, it's been so hard ever since I lost the use of my dominant hand when I broke my finger last month, and now it's embarrassing when I sign receipts at the grocery store. And like everybody had like this sob story, but they were like really specific sob stories about a hand, and all temporary. And so it felt like really dramatic, but people were being like really nice to each other and like, oh, I totally understand what you're doing. And I was like, started hoping that this was going to be like my new group of friends, and like we would really bond together, and reunions for the rest of our lives. And like when my old friends come to us at the lunch table and they're like, Eli, come eat lunch with us, and I'll be like, I'm eating lunch with my new friends, and then they walk away like all indignant, and like these are the people that I spend the rest of my life with. And eventually I write our memoirs when everybody else is dead, and I make myself look really good in them, and then I get a Nobel Peace Prize because of it. And then I'm like, when I'm giving my Nobel Peace Prize speech, I'm like, I always wanted to be a silent hero. But like, that was just what I was thinking in the waiting room, and then I got called out of there. I never saw those people again. So the specialist is like, takes all these x-rays, looks at my hand, he's like, oh, pop, 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 and he's like, oh, it's broken. Seriously? And I was like, if you tell me I have to go see a doctor, I'm done. I'm done with this whole thing. And he's like, no, but you do need a surgery, and you're going to have a surgery. We have to drill 4 screws into your hand. I was really freaked out about this. Christmas was approaching, on Christmas of all times. Christmas was approaching, and law school finals were like the next week. And I was really freaked out about that, because law school finals are hard, and you have to type for like 3 hours in each test, and it's really hard to type with one hand. And a finger. I figured I could like stick my finger out and type like that, but it was hard to feel like I was going to be able to be competitive in these tests, and I was really stressed about this. But the doctor said, you have to have the surgery, that's, you know, or else your hand is going to look like that for the rest of your life. And I was like, well, I haven't found a use for this yet. So we had the surgery. And my friend Annette took me to the surgery at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I don't know why they scheduled it for 4 o'clock in the morning, but it felt really shady to me, like we weren't supposed to be doing it. I think everything feels shady at 4 o'clock in the morning. But anyway, so we go to the doctor, the hospital, whatever, and I think the surgery went fine, and I came out of it okay, and then I had to go deal with these law school finals in the final weeks. And I was feeling really sick all the time, and I was in this like constant like drug haze, because I was now taking sleeping pills and things people were giving me on the street. I'm just kidding, I wasn't doing that. Probably, I don't remember. I actually don't remember much from this time. So the story gets fucked. I'm not checking my texts, although I did just get one. The reason I'm pulling this out is because I want to give you a little example of what these drugs were doing to me at the time. I had got in like a really bad habit when I was taking like sleeping pills of thinking that that was a really good time to take care of important life decisions. For example, I filed my taxes in such a state. I also decided that that would be a really good time to start calling all of my friends and acquaintances and professional acquaintances and people I shouldn't be calling when I'm drugged out, and sending them text messages and emails and so forth. And there was one night when I contacted my friend Jenna, who was a classmate of mine, and sent her 6 text messages all within 10 minutes of each other. And I recorded these on this phone here so that I could read them to you now. Text message number 1. Dear Jenna, I don't remember any of this, by the way. And the next day I saw her at school, and she was like, so how was your night last night? And I was like, fine. And she was like, did you check your outgoing text messages? And I pulled these up, and it was like, I like seriously thought somebody had gone into my phone and done this. I did not remember this. Text message number 1. Dear Jenna, I want to start a business teaching yoga to Yoda. Arthur Fonzarelli. 2. You don't own me, Jenna. You don't own any part of my body. Pass the ketchup. She didn't respond between any of these, by the way. 3. Sprinkles and slap bracelets and philanthropy. Remind me later to propose this idea. Winner. 4. Jenna, who's your daddy? I am. Peekaboo. 5. Jenna, I'm not really your daddy. Just don't want to pay child support. Over and out. And then my favorite is the last one. Jenna, I have a quote for you. Quote, written out, quote. Oh, by the way, all of these words are misspelled. Every word is misspelled. I have a quote for you. Quote, we are the change we've been waiting for. End quote. Edgar Allan Pope said that. I think he's Catholic. I should have taken those pills for tonight. Maybe I did. Law school finals ended, and I think like the next week was Christmas. And I remember right after my last final, I walked into the bathroom of the school, and I looked in the mirror, and I did not recognize myself. It was a very strange experience. But I was really, really thin. I was the thinnest I could ever remember seeing myself. I was really thin. My clothes were kind of hanging off of me. And I had like not gotten a haircut for a really long time, and so my hair was like kind of shaggy. I was totally violating the BYU rules of whatever. And my hand was in this cast, and it was like, you know, in this sling or whatever, and my eyes looked sunken, and I just looked so sickly. And I was looking in this mirror and had kind of seen what had happened to me over the course of these last several months, from having a tapeworm to having the swine flu to breaking my hand to having the surgery to going through this really traumatic kind of thing, all in the middle of trying to deal with law school finals with this competitive student body here in Provo. And it was kind of a traumatic thing. And I went to my parents' house for the Christmas break. And I remember thinking the day before Christmas, I just kept thinking, this is the worst Christmas. This is the worst Christmas ever. And I never want to experience what I've just recently experienced again. I never want to have to go through this again. And I thought, this is not going to be, you know, a time in my life that I'm going to look back on fondly at all. And I like frequently, I'm a little bit of a Christmas hater. I think Christmas is a little over the top, and so I like tend to be like a little bah humbug about it. And my mom is like Mrs. Claus. She like spreads Christmas joy wherever she goes. I think that movie Elf was about her. And so like we like butt heads about this whole Christmas thing, and that year was no exception. And I was talking to her one day while I was at her house, and I was like, I really hate Christmas, and this Christmas is really awful, and whine, and she's like, Christmas cheer. And she said, well, you know, Christmas is what you make of it, and it's only bad if you decide to focus on the bad things. If you would just focus on the good things, you would love Christmas. And I was like, yeah, but what is there to love about this one? And I got thinking about it, and I was trying really hard to have this like Christmas cheer, and I got thinking about it. I was like, well, you know what? I did go through some really kind of crappy things recently, but because I went through those crappy things, I got to see the kindness of so many people. I got to see the tired smile of a friend at 4 o'clock in the morning as she saw me go into and come out of surgery safely. And I got to see this little support group form in the middle of this waiting room that was really weird, but really nice and kind of sweet all at the same time. And I thought, you know, if this is the silver lining, maybe this isn't really such a bad Christmas after all. I went to bed that night. It was Christmas Eve. Went to bed that night. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and I started feeling lightheaded and dizzy. And I got up, because that's what you do when you feel lightheaded, is you walk around. I got up and I started walking around, and I fainted again. And when I came to, my cast was off my hand. One of the stitches had split open, and I was bleeding onto the floor. And I was like, nope, this is the worst Christmas ever.